It doesn't matter where you live, whether it's Halifax, Toronto, or Vancouver. In this red-hot rental market, Canadians are having to spend a larger chunk of their paycheck on rent.
Rent in Toronto is absolutely insane.
Well, I just found out my rent's gonna be increased from $2,100 a month to $2,400 a month for a one-bedroom condo in Toronto.
A spooky problem is scaring Canada, the issue of not getting paid enough. In these tough times when things cost more, homes are hard to buy, taxes are super high, healthcare is too pricey, and school is expensive, Canadian pay hasn't gone up. It's like people are quietly suffering, feeling like they're being harmed without anyone noticing. It's like they're shouting, but no one is listening. In today's video, we'll talk about how the stagnant wage crisis is hurting people in Canada and why it matters. Canada is one of the few rich countries where people aren't making as much money as they used to before the pandemic. In 2019, the average income for each person was around $56,000, but now it's only $55,000. That means each person has about $1,200 less income each year, or around $2,800 less for each family, compared to 4 years ago. But the alarm bells have already been rung by the OECD, as it thinks Canada will have the slowest growing economy among all the rich countries from 2020 to 2060. Young people in Canada who dream of doing well are looking at 40 years of stagnant wages. It's like you wake up, go to work really hard, but your pay doesn't go up. Take Sylvana Orellana from Toronto, for example. She's struggling to pay her rent, take care of herself and her son, and cover everyday costs, even though she's working for the minimum wage and she's getting help from her friends and family.
Sylvana Orellana is a single mom with a full-time job. But earning minimum wage, she's falling behind on paying rent.
I'm currently in a one-bedroom and a den, and the den isn't that big, and that's where my baby sleeps. The bedroom isn't also that big. This is technically a basement, and I'm paying close to $2,000 for it.
But Orellana isn't the only one in this tough situation. It's the reality for most people in Canada. Sadly, they feel like they're facing a very tough time on Earth all by themselves. The wage crisis in Canada is not just a random problem. It's like a wound that Canada inflicted upon itself. Many people in the Canadian government knew that there was something wrong with the way the economy was working, but they didn't act quickly. This wage problem has been created by several main reasons, and it's pretty certain that the government knows about them, but they've wasted a lot of time not doing something about it. The first reason is the usual suspect. Canadian companies are not very good at being productive. This is sad because we know why they aren't doing well. They don't invest enough money, they spend less on research and development compared to companies in other rich countries, and they don't come up with new ideas often. These behaviors make it hard for them to do better, and that holds back the Canadian economy. It's hard to understand why companies in Canada don't want to do things that can contribute to the success of their companies. And it's also puzzling why the federal government doesn't do much to change this when it's clear that it's making the Canadian economy fall behind. But there's another problem too. There isn't enough competition between Canadian companies. They operate in small and separate markets, so they don't have to fight against each other as much as American or European companies do. In those places, companies have to try harder to stand out and keep their customers. But in Canada, companies don't need to work as hard, and that means they don't compete well in the global market. This hurts the growth, and it makes the whole Canadian economy slow down, like water leaking out of a damaged pipe. The second culprit for the wage crisis is the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, or TFWP. It's like a double blow for Canadian workers. First, the TFWP allows employers to bring in foreign workers, creating a bigger pool of potential employees. When there are lots of foreign workers available, employers can offer lower wages to Canadian workers. This puts pressure on their pay, making it harder for them to earn more. Second, when Canadian workers ask for higher wages or better working conditions, some employers replace them with foreign workers who will accept lower pay. This weakens the power of Canadian workers to negotiate for better wages and working conditions. Now adding the sad part about how foreign workers doing the same jobs often get paid less. In a study from 2019 by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, alternatives, it was found that foreign workers doing the same jobs as Canadians are often paid less. For example, in the retail sector, foreign workers were paid about $2.25 less per hour than Canadian workers. In the food and beverage sector, they were paid about $1.90 less per hour. This means that even when Canadians and foreign workers are doing the same work, Canadians are often getting paid less than what they could be getting paid, and it's a big part of the wage crisis. It's like a punch in the gut for Canadian workers who are struggling to make ends meet. The wage crisis in Canada is being fueled by some strange decisions in immigration policies. Canada is seeing one of the fastest population growths due to a big influx of immigrants. It might sound good on the surface, but it's turning into a doomsday scenario for locals. Immigrants might be happy, but it's coming at the expense of the happiness of the people who are already living here. It's like a bloodbath scenario, but instead of blood, it's the sweat of Canadians. Another major cause of the wage crisis in Canada is the soaring cost of rent. Whether you're a Canadian worker earning minimum wage or an average income, finding affordable housing in the country's major cities is nearly impossible. Unfortunately, these cities are where most of the jobs are located. A report from the CCPA points out the average hourly wage needed to afford a one-bedroom apartment while working full-time is $26 in Ontario, $27 in British Columbia, $21 in Alberta, and $16 in Quebec. This means that even if you work full-time, it's really tough to pay for a one-bedroom apartment in these provinces. To make matters worse, even years ago, earning the minimum wage couldn't get you a one-bedroom unit. Now it's even more challenging. The high rents in major cities put those earning minimum wage at risk of ending up without a place to live, teetering on the edge of homelessness. It's like a never-ending struggle for Canadian workers who just want a roof over their heads. The impacts of this are even worse. Imagine being a Canadian trying to survive. With high inflation and skyrocketing housing costs, it's becoming harder for more and more people to afford basic needs like a place to live and even things like electricity and food. You've probably heard about the housing market. For most Canadians, owning a house is like a dream that's way out of reach. Mortgages are high, and this is happening at the same time as the wage crisis. Renting is another pain in the gut. It's expensive, and if you manage to pay rent, you might still have to deal with short-term rentals like Airbnb, which can be a nightmare. To top it off, basic goods are becoming scarce due to global inflation. So where can Canadians go when faced with this situation? The harsh truth is that approximately 235,000 Canadians experience homelessness each year, and that number is going up. Being homeless isn't a choice. All of this is making crime seem like the norm. Canada is moving towards becoming more like a third world country with no decent housing, living standards that are out of reach, and a high cost of living. When Canadians should have the right to good jobs, immigrants are coming in and working for less, leaving Canadians with no jobs. How can they survive in this incredibly tough economy? It's even worse than a severe nightmare. It's like living in a hellish situation that's hard to escape from. Another devastating impact of the wage crisis in Canada is the alarmingly high suicide rates. It's a heartbreaking reality that many people in Canada face. Each year, about 4,500 individuals in Canada lose their lives to suicide, which is equivalent to 12 people taking their own lives every single day. But for each person lost to suicide, many more go through thoughts of suicide or even try to take their own lives.
We're about 4 to 5 a month right now, currently as we stand, so it has gone up throughout the years.
Shockingly, every day over 200 people in Canada attempt suicide. The mental and emotional toll caused by the wage crisis is immense. While some elites might be enjoying privileges, many Canadians are left feeling like they're drowning in despair and frustration. It's a stark contrast, and it's the ordinary Canadians who are left crying and suffering. They need help and support, but it often feels like their struggles go unheard. The wage crisis isn't just about money, it's about the well-being and lives of the people it affects. In this climate, the very essence of the right to life as envisioned in Canada's social fabric may be compromised. It is imperative for all stakeholders, including policymakers, employers, and communities, to heed these alarms and take decisive action. The consequences of inaction could be severe and far-reaching. The time to address the wage crisis is now, before it leads to a chain reaction of negative impacts on the lives of Canadians. To learn more about the other factors making the Canadian wage crisis feel even worse, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. Thanks for watching.